What happens when the very traits that drive your success start working against you? Discipline, grit, relentless drive. For many entrepreneurs, those qualities are celebrated until the lack of sleep, constant pressure, and nonstop pace quietly take their toll. Welcome, or hopefully welcome back to The Reluctant Entrepreneur. On today's episode, I'm joined by Tim Thomas, whose journey spans elite performance, personal reckoning, and entrepreneurship. Tim served in the Australian Special Forces, operating in one of the most demanding, high-pressure environments imaginable, where resilience, discipline, and endurance aren't optional. But like many high performers, Tim eventually discovered that pushing harder isn't always sustainable, especially when stress and sleep deprivation become the norm rather than the exception. That realization marked a turning point. What began as a deeply personal effort to recover physically and mentally eventually evolved into an entrepreneurial path focused on breathwork, sleep, and recovery. In this episode, we talk about Tim's transition from special forces into entrepreneurship, the challenge of turning a personal recovery process into business, and why recovery isn't the opposite of performance. It's a requirement for it. We also explore what entrepreneurs can learn from Tim's experience about managing stress, protecting sleep, redefining success, and building businesses that don't come at the cost of long-term health. If you ever felt successful on paper, but exhausted in reality, this conversation will resonate. My conversation with Tim Thomas begins right now. Stick around. Tim Thomas, welcome to the program. I'm so glad you're my guest today. I'm really excited about this conversation.
Yeah, Mike, I was looking forward to being on your show, and this next hour is going to be a lot of fun. I can tell that already.
You know, when I first started my business 34 years ago, I felt like I was in the special forces. You know, I did not serve in the military. I have a great deal of respect for those that have, but it felt like 5 years at least, maybe 10, of boot camp. That's what the Hollywood stereotypical version of boot camp and drill sergeants. That's what it felt like. Only everything around me was my drill sergeant. I reported to everybody, to my customers, to my vendors, to my employees, to the weather, to the economy, to technology, and it was definitely stressful. And particularly in the earliest days, sleep was not a luxury that I had, mainly because I was just working all the time. I would come in, it wasn't unusual for me to come in on a Monday morning at 7 and not leave until Tuesday evening at 11 and do that again a couple days later. And I think that may be normal in the earliest days, but it's very tempting to extend that out. Say, hey, I got it done. I didn't have to hire 12 people. I got it done. I did it myself. And there is a time that catches up to you. You don't see it coming, but suddenly you just can't do it anymore. And I think that's maybe one of the 10,000 reasons businesses fail. It's because the owner is burned out and stressed out and has no more energy. And when you lack energy, you lack creativity. You can't see solutions. You just start spiraling down. Is all that familiar to you? Does that sound like a record you've heard before?
Look, Mike, you could stop the show now. If people listened to what you just said then and really took it on board, you would get rid of a heap of reasons why people fail. Because it's not that they're not hard workers. It's not that they're not high performers. It's not that they can't push themselves. But in our society, there's this accepted normal of, well, sleep later. Sleep's not important. Sleep's a luxury. And you can definitely get by for a period of time.
Yeah.
And I think there are times and places to put yourself. This country was made great by that. But I'll tell you my real experience. I kept on cashing in my tomorrows to live today. Yeah. And eventually those tomorrows caught up on me and I just went, bleh.
Yeah, you become overdrawn. You're
even the little things became funds.
Hard. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it happens quite stealthily, right? It's just one day your body just goes, okay, you're not listening to the signs. I'm just going to shut you down. And it
Yeah.
happens fast. At least it did for me. Let's start at kind of the beginning. Give my audience an idea of who Tim Thomas is, your early years, what led you to serve in the military, and your experience serving in special forces of all things.
Okay, sure. So early years, my dad was an overseas missionary, and he worked with the Aboriginal Australians, First Nations and Australians. So I grew up in a very different culture within a culture. It gave me an incredible connection to land and country. And through my high school years, I was dyslexic, so I struggled to understand what everyone was saying to me, and sitting still was very difficult. But I noticed whenever I moved my physical body, I felt smarter, and I didn't know why. And in my 20s, and back in the 80s, they didn't have a name for dyslexia. The technical term back then was, Tim, you're stupid.
Wow.
And yet I was told that enough times and I started believing it, right? So it wasn't until I was in my 20s and I started doing these IQ tests, and I'm seeing these things. I'm like, oh, wow, I'm not as stupid as I think I am, or as I've been told. And in some areas, I'm actually in the top percentile. Okay, so as a dyslexic, my pattern recognition was in the top percentile. And a pattern I saw is within Australia, there's this assumed sense of safety where, we still leave, windows unlocked. It's a situation where if I saw that if our sense of safety was challenged, then we would overreact to it, and it would take generations to get rid of. And this was about the time of the Bali bombings. So the Bali bombings was a terrorist bombing in Bali where a bunch of Australians died, and some of those people I knew quite well. And I thought, well, these guys aren't sticking to a certain border. I feel like I'd rather be fighting in them somewhere else and keeping them destabilized.
Sure.
And I'm not unrealistic. There's no such thing as winning these things. I see it as, well, you've just got to keep them in a disorganized, off-centered capacity so they're not overreaching past their own boundaries,
Yeah, sure.
So this was an interesting time, because in 2004, the Australian government started a very unique scheme. First time in Australia's military history, they started a direct recruiting from the civilian population into special forces. And the oldest allowable age was 30, and I was actually 30. And everyone was saying, Tim, you're too old, right? But I thought, well, I'll be the one that decides whether I'm old or not. And being dyslexic, the pattern I saw was, this is the first time I've ever aged. This is the first time I've been at this age. This is the first time you've been at this age. So shouldn't it be us that decides what we can and can't do at that particular age, right? And so they started with 70 guys, and it got down to less than 15 because they didn't want us there. We were considered civilian queue jumpers because you had to spend 2 years in a regular battalion before you could even apply for special forces. And here were these civilians jumping the queue. But the reason the government ran that scheme is because they knew war was coming. The most economical way to fight this war was with special forces. So as soon as we started, graduating, Afghanistan kicked off, and that then led to a 6-year career in the special forces. Very busy time. Felt great at times, but I didn't know that with all these external demands on me, it was cashing in my tomorrows to live today. And when I got out in 2010, I didn't know that I'd crashed. It was just a case of life is so freaking hard. And I didn't know I was making life harder for people around me. I just knew that everyone's difficult. Okay, I can say that with perspective now.
Sure.
And unfortunately, when I stuck my hand up for help. The help didn't help. In fact, they made it worse. And I didn't know how inept the mainstream medical system was for healing people until I was in a position where I really needed healing, and I was, I guess, quite vulnerable. And I remember thinking, Tim, you're the toughest guy you know, and you're struggling in this system that doesn't understand and doesn't seem to want to make you better. And I got really angry about that. But then I asked the question, well, how many other people are in the same situation? And then upon pondering that, I started seeing thousands of people left and right of me stuck in the same situation, saying, Tim, if you can find a way forward for you, you can find a way forward for us. So I like the name of your podcast, The Reluctant Entrepreneur, because it's often when we see a responsibility that we are we didn't choose it, but we reluctantly go into it because we see the gravity of the situation, and we move forward not knowing how the hell to do it, but we just know it needs to be done.
Sure.
And it's very easy to overwork when you feel the weight of that responsibility. And I created Australia's some of the most successful recovery programs in the veteran space in Australia. I had a lifetime goal of saving 40 veteran lives from suicide, and that was achieved within 12 months. And
Wow.
I did that because my dyslexic pattern recognition saw something that no one else saw. And that was, and I really want people to listen to this, it doesn't matter where the pain comes from, or if it's physical or emotional. I came to this awareness through the veteran space, but you could have fatigue through business, you could have cancer, you could have a relationship, problem. But the pain, again, doesn't matter if it's physical or emotional, doesn't matter where it comes from, it gets to a certain point where it transforms into loneliness, isolation. I'm the only one going through this. And from that position of disconnect, it's really hard to make an empowered choice. It's really hard to get out of the maze and see it from that drone-like space, as we discussed in the preamble. And so there's so many resources that get poured into, healing spaces, mental health, and all that sort of stuff. But if you're not addressing the isolation someone's feeling, the loneliness they're feeling, it's water off a duck's back. And the other thing that made me super effective in the space was when we're the only ones that have our back and we have to be continually alert for threats, that deadline, that business agreement, is this guy doing the right thing? Because if we drop our guard for a second, something bad's going to happen and it's going to be our fault, right? So we're not sleeping properly. And so loneliness and fatigue from not sleeping properly is two of the most dangerous human conditions. And addressing those two effectively is what made me so successful in such a short period of time. The simple idea of these program success was judged on how much quality of sleep was improved. Because if you want to go in reverse, all the mental health problems, the likelihood of getting them is increased by 200 to 300% by poor sleep. So, you and me could be a normal person. You take out our sleep for a period of time, the likelihood of us getting a mental illness goes up 200 to 300%. In the Special Forces, we didn't know anything about the science of sleep. We would actively target the enemy's sleep because we knew if we could take it out for 3 nights, it would mess them up better than a bullet.
Right. Well, we learned from interrogators in Iraq, the public learned, I'm sure this was not a secret to the people in that business, that sleep deprivation was an interrogation tactic. Some human welfare agencies, even went so far as to consider that torture. And, if you think about it, they're just blasting, heavy metal or something that they don't like that keeps them awake, having bright lights and stopping them from sleeping. And next thing you know, there's there's nothing left of that person in terms of mental strength and will to resist. It just all goes away. So clearly, the military knows the importance of sleep. I don't know if they know the importance of sleep for their soldiers. There's probably less of a respect for that.
Don't
But
get
they
me
know.
started on that one.
I can only imagine. Looking back, were there early signs that the pace and stress you were starting to take took a toll on your body and mind? At what point did you start to actually, realize it?
Well, I'm sure soldiers are no different to entrepreneurs. Everything starts out fine, and there's not necessarily one definitive moment. You just
Right.
sort of get by, and things happen over time. So people think the collapse is all of a sudden, but what usually happens before the fatigue really kicks in, and people often don't see this, but they just haven't laughed out loud for a year or two. They haven't
Right.
stopped and seen something so incredibly beautiful that it takes your breath away. And life's occurring in two colors. What I want, what I don't want, what's safe and what's not safe.
A very binary life at that point. Yeah. Yeah, I think I've experienced that, not to the extreme that you have, but not realizing I was stressed, not realizing I hadn't laughed in a long time. And then all of a sudden, you've got this little respite, you've got this night out, you're with a good friend, you're having a great time, you laugh, you forgot what it was like to laugh, and then you realize, like, oh my God, I needed this. I haven't laughed, I haven't had this good a time in so long. You recognize it once you get a glimpse of it, even if it doesn't last. And that's that was my clue. Like, I need to either do this more often or change what happens in between times like that, because those times are very
Yeah.
few and far apart, right? Particularly for entrepreneurs. Was burnout something openly discussed in special forces, or something individuals dealt with quietly?
I think it was just an accepted normal behavior. Like,
Of course
one of
you're
the
burned
medics
out,
says,
right?
"Hey, your men have an unhealthy addiction to anti-inflammatories," and he's like, "So what?
Yeah.
That's just part of the job." And I noticed at about the 4-year mark in the unit, most of the guys would have this faraway look in their eyes. We call it the 1,000-mile stare. And it was almost a point of inclusion, like, oh, that guy's worked hard enough. He can be in the space and sit at the table of warriors. But it was just messed up. And I'm a pretty cheerful guy. I used to sing every now and then, and they mistook that for, well, he hasn't worked hard enough, so they'd ride me even harder.
Yeah, we're gonna work the cheer out of you, right?
Yeah.
Until you're just a fighting machine. If I were to compare being an employee versus a company founder, I would equate that as the difference between maybe an enlisted soldier and elite special forces, or a commando of some sort. Do you see any parallels between your experience with special forces and entrepreneurship? It sounds like from your last answer, you feel that way.
Look, it really doesn't matter where the stress comes from. If we identify that as it impacts our survivability, okay, so whether, it's an enemy RPG or a deadline, if you've attached yourself to that is your survival, that is the survival of my children, then the stress response is the same. And there's nothing wrong with stress. It's actually there to be beneficial. But if we don't have access to know how to deal with that stress, reduce that stress, go back into our, rest, digest, connect with our loved ones, see beauty and laugh. And that's the missing point. It's not the hard work that's the problem. It's our ability to switch to fight, flight, to rest, digest. And unfortunately, when I didn't know that, my ignorance didn't protect me. I lost many years of my life to pills and alcohol, because that was my way of self-medicating. Because I just knew that I didn't know why, but I had to drink half a carton of grog before I spoke to my then wife. And I call her my then wife, not my ex-wife, because I noticed that ex-wife has too much negative energy attached to it, and I stand for a positive future. So I say then wife because it was a past tense, and I'm not attaching anything to that.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. That's, we've all heard of people have a flight or fight mentality, right? We've heard that scenario in your world in special forces and in most entrepreneurs' world. There is no flight option, right? It's just fight. It's fight or fight harder. And, there is not an easy option of just getting out of the situation. You just can't go to your superior and go, hey, you know what? I don't want to take that hill today. I'm not feeling like it, right? And in my world, when I started my company, I mean, I was literally, this is before the internet, I was literally going through my garbage can looking for stamps that didn't have the post office's cancel mark on it so I could tape them to envelopes and send out brochures to customers. That's how broke I was and the business was. In fact, we were technically insolvent. I just didn't realize it. I just kept thinking, well, I'll just get one more order and that'll cover payroll tomorrow. Profit is not my problem today. I just need to cover payroll. So it was, put out the fire, put out the fire, put out the fire. There was no option for, or even a thought for a flight, because that would be like jumping off the cliff to avoid bad guys. It's like, that's not an option, right? So when people have the failure is not an option mentality, which is a good mentality when you're starting a business, that takes some options off the table. So, we need to think differently about our definition of flight. Our definition of flight might mean a good night's rest. A definition of flight might mean seeking out and getting help.
Well, I want to add something in here because a lot of people confuse the wellness space and they avoid it because they don't want to be a tree-hugging hippie eating tofu sitting on top of a mountaintop doing nothing, right?
Right, kumbaya,
so
yeah.
There's, we're here to kick ass and chew bubblegum. That's what we're born to do. We're born to create structure that never existed before, and that's our responsibility. It's stuff that we see and no one else sees, and we don't need thanks or anything. It's just what we do. So what I want to presence people to is it's not the fact that, Mike, you're looking through garbage bins for a stamp. It's if that stress stopped you going home and seeing just how beautiful your family is, just how beautiful the sunset is. That's the point where you start realizing that there's something that we're not switching out of. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, totally, completely. So your company is breathwork in bed. What does bed have to do with it? Help me put that into context.
Okay, so it dovetails quite nicely into our ability to go from, kicking ass chewing bubblegum in our business, in the world, to switching into all is well, I can drop my guard, tomorrow will take care of itself, and letting your body fully restore itself, fully recover, plugging back. I mean, the analogy I use with teenagers is imagine if you never charged your phone. It wouldn't last that long. But phones have this thing that humans do, and we go into this power saver mode. When the phone's at like 5 or 2%, it shuts down the amount of options you have, and the screen's really dim. You can still use it, but it's barely functioning.
Yeah.
And us humans tend to do that for many years. We go into this power saving mode where we're not enjoying life. We're just somewhat robotically going about things. And we've simply lost access to our higher thinking. Like I said, we've lost access to that drone in the sky that sees everything and can guide us to the next point. So something I learned in Afghanistan and then refined through my own divorce was what I call the performance pyramid. Okay, so think of performance like a pyramid. Top of the pyramid, you're making bank. You're creating your business the way it wants to be. Your relationships are the way they want them to be. And then at the bottom of the pyramid, you've got your rest, recovery, and healing art forms. And the top looks nothing like the bottom, and the bottom looks nothing like the top, but they are interconnected. And a lot of people see what you're doing in the world, but they don't see what you're doing in your rest, recovery, healing art forms. No one praises you. Hey, good for you. You actually got a good night's sleep. I'm going to stick that on my social media. All right.
Yeah,
Although
right.
I have had my LinkedIn's blowing up right now because I've had some high profile clients in the US saying, hey, I wasn't getting any sleep at all after working with Tim. My sleep is amazing and my life is a whole lot more amazing. It's funny how those two things work. So understanding that they're not separate and the ability to disconnect at the end of the day. And I'm not the only one where you've had a busy day, you flick the light off, you've gotten into bed, and there's a part of you still running around. That's a thing, okay? And it's very dangerous to have your time in bed interrupted by cortisol, stress. So breathwork in bed was created to give people access to the bottom of their pyramid, to widen the base of their pyramid so they could build the top. And what people need to understand is if you widen the base of your pyramid, you're not just going to be performing better, you're going to be performing longer. So think about you getting really poor sleep and then expecting to perform. And then there's you knowing how to sleep, loving your bed, turning it into a cloud every night. And then in the morning, it turns into a trampoline and you've recharged yourself. You're back at 100%, as opposed to waking up terrible. Life is hard. This is just the way life is. Feeling nauseous. Shut up until I've had a coffee. That's how I used to live. A lot of people used to live.
Sure.
So, and the world makes money out of us. And I call it an economy of dysfunction. When we're dysfunctioning, there's a lot of things we buy we don't need to buy. Energy drinks, coffee, alcohol. And I got no problem with products. Don't think I'm bagging out products here. I'm just saying we often if we're not managing our energy properly, we become dependent on these external sources of energy. And we're serving them, they're not serving us.
Right.
So what I encourage people to be aware of is if you can get your performance pyramid happening the way it's supposed to, you aren't going to age like everyone else ages. Your performance is going to get stronger while everyone else is dipping. And in the reality, because I believe we can choose the reality we live into, the reality where you're choosing to sleep well, doing the things that's needed to turn your bed into a cloud every night, doing the things to wake you up in the morning to correctly without dependence on external substances, that's the person that has a much higher likelihood of that consistent effort in business, turning up at 100%, not just at 5% each day, and life just becomes super hard.
And stress begets stress. I mean, if you want more stress, be stressful, because now you're looking at your business or your life through a lens of everything here is awful. How, just bring it on, just, come on, just bring it on. Yeah. And you tend to I can manifest stress just by being stressful, ironically. Before Breathwork in Bed existed, did you see yourself as an entrepreneur, or did this begin purely as a personal journey?
No, I just saw a lot of other people stuck in the same situation. And it's funny, if it was just me, just Tim, I could drink myself into oblivion. But when I saw all these other people, it made me see I have to get through this so I can give people access. Because when people are hurting, fatigued, they're very vulnerable. They're very open to being sold something they don't need and believing the BS that's out there. And I thought, well, if I ever get into a position of authority, and let me just explain the journey of either getting stronger, and I don't see it too dissimilar. In business, there's a lot of people that market solutions to improve things, and the money you pay and the time you spend doesn't give you a particularly good return. They're not all born equal. And then there's people that aren't marketers, but they're super powerful at what they do. And I've usually found those type of people have connected into something super powerful, and they have a relationship with it, and they'll introduce you to that powerful relationship. And once you've been connected to that, there's no resales. So when people are on their start of their, let's just call it the healing journey right now, it's not an age of information we're in. We're in an age of marketing. The first 6 pages of Google are marketers. And they're quite happy to take dollars out of your pocket and put you into an early grave. But there's healers. And a healer is someone who knows they're human. They don't have enough energy for 2 people, but they have a connection to something super powerful. And it might have taken them 10 years to get that connection, but they can give it to you in far less time. And you can have all the fruits that they have in their life in far less time. And the shocking thing is just how quickly it can happen when you have the right information in your corner. And that was the promise I made. It was February 2011 where I made that promise to myself. I was just in the middle of what I'd consider hell. And I thought, well, if I find a way out, I don't care if it takes me 10 years, but I have a feeling that I'm going to be able to help other people cross that space in far less time.
What was the first concrete step you took that turned your idea into an actual business?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'd worked for about 10 years in the veteran recovery space creating programs. So I was getting, paid to work in veteran charities. Also did an amount of fundraising, without blowing my own trumpet. My team and I have raised over $1.3 million for charities that help veterans with PTSD, cancer, respiratory illness, and brain disease. So that was part of the experience. My journey was only started when it was prompted by a lieutenant colonel sending me an email. I'd just done a workshop on one of the Army bases. He didn't attend, but he said, look, I had my corporals and sergeants coming up to me saying that was the first good night's sleep they had in up to 5 years. And that was just after one workshop, right? And he thought it was awesome. But I'm like, that's terrible. They haven't been sleeping in 5 years. You know how much of an impact that will make? And just on that, it's a pretty easy win in the corporate space because sleep poor people take twice as many sick days, So I'll say to people, you want to cut your sick days in half? Have a conversation with me.
Sounds like a great ROI on that investment from a business perspective, right? I mean, they're saving way more.
Again,
there's a great ROI on that from a business perspective. The amount they pay, the amount they save by keeping their employees healthy, through sleep, totally is way more than they pay you for that, for that training, right? It sounds like a no-brainer kind of ROI thing, if it truly yields that kind of result.
Yeah, I know companies now that incentivize sleep because sleep's a very measurable metric. So if they actually financially incentivize quality sleep of their employees, so it's and it shows up super powerfully because it's not just absenteeism, it's presenteeism. Sleep poor people are usually 30 to 40% less productive.
I like that word, presenteeism. I think you made that up, but I think it should be in the dictionary. That's a
yeah,
that's a great word. What surprised you most about building a business outside of a structured, command-driven environment? I mean, you went from one extreme to another. You went from an environment that was extremely structured to kind of the Wild West of entrepreneurship.
Again, it was the need I saw in front of me. It wasn't something I expected to do. And I didn't quite finish what I was saying before, but this email from this Louis Colonel said it was great when you were there, but what have you got when you're not there? So a little thing that I run off, Mike, is I call it my own P test. Okay, it's funny, right? 3 Ps. Everything I do has to be powerful. It has to be positive, but the third P is most important. It's got to be permanent. Okay, right. And there's a lot of powerful and positive stuff out there, but I judge success on how permanent the impact is, because it's great when you're there, but what if you care about people, you've got to care about them the next day, the day after that, etc. Right? So when this Louis Colonel said that, I'm like, I just failed my own P test, and I withdrew from public life for about 2 years. I spent tens of thousands of dollars, got an IT team, and designed this little, breathwork in bed resource that is not high tech, but it gives you access to the high tech inside your own lung space. So when you go to sleep, it'll show you to breathe a certain way and turn your bed into a cloud, literally tonight. And then in the morning, that's the game changer, because most people wake up going, oh my gosh, another day. If you can spend a few minutes just connecting to your breath, removing that stuck energy, your feet fling over the side of the bed. And the old saying, if you can win the first 5 minutes of the day, you've won the day. And this is why I created that, for people to access the power inside their own lungs.
That's amazing. What early mistakes did you make that you now see as necessary learning experiences?
Believing bullshit marketers.
Well,
I swear,
most
those
of the
marketers,
bullshit
they're good at
marketers.
selling themselves and what they can do, but then when it comes to producing the goods, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I have this thing against these self-help people that many of them are the same. They open the video with a picture of them getting out of a Bentley or a Rolls Royce at the edge of on the tarmac next to their G6, private plane, and pictures of scantily clad women in their backyard at the pool and a cocktail party going on. And if you want this, I'll show you how. Just send me $1,299. That's how he got rich or she got rich, right? To me, there's not much difference between that and carnival barkers and so-called religious, preachers on TV asking, to send money, and they'll send you holy water, blessed holy water or something. It's been going on for 1,000 years or millennia, since humans were on the earth. And to me, that's robbery, really. But
It's so dangerous, because people start losing trust. In a world where when we don't have trust, we mistakenly think we need more stuff.
yes,
But if you can have people around you, like Mike, think of this for a concept. Us humans were built for connection. Our peace, power, productivity, happiness is all connected to how connected we are. And Mike, if you knew I had your back 100 frickin' percent, and you had my back 100 frickin' percent, like, everything else becomes a really small detail really quickly, and I can't make others more trustworthy. But I had this experience once where I realized the power of trust, and I thought, well, if I can generate what's needed in me, because I've got to fill my own needs, because if I'm feeling inadequate, it's going to show up in how I interact with people. I'll always be trying to control the outcome. But this might sound a bit off topic, but I realized the power of trust in another human when I was. And again, I don't want to sound off topic. I know this is an entrepreneur podcast, but I just want to show you that the gravity of the situation that had me get to this situation. So I'm about to die. I am mid shark attack. This shark had me, and it was drowning me. It wasn't killing me because it was eating me, but it had me, and I was drowning. And I'm thinking, okay, that's it for Tim. But then my mate Jimmy, I look up and there he is, and he's swimming. I'm spearfishing, I should say. I'm spearfishing, and I'm with a buddy, and he's swimming down. He's got his gun ready, and he was a fellow operator, and we're used to sort of shooting close to each other in rooms. But the point is, in his eyes, he had this look of, Tim, I've got this, and I've got you. And even though my whole body was convulsing because I was drowning, obviously in a stress situation.
Sure.
This whole wave from the top of my head went vroom of peace, centeredness, and I knew exactly what to do next. And all
just
I
by
did
those words,
was I
just by
turned
the
my
confidence.
turned my body. He took the shot and hit the shark, and obviously I lived to swim another day.
It's funny you tell that story now. I didn't mention to my guests, but if they haven't figured it out already, you're talking to me from Australia. today. And Australia has been in the news the last few days. There's been some big, high-profile shark attacks going on right now. So that's a perfect, not analogy, that's the perfect experience to share right now, because that's a real situation going on right now in Australia. And I think, as an aside, totally go down a rabbit hole here, scientists believe it's because the water is unusually murky, and sharks tend to like that. But so stay out of that murky water, Tim.
True. Well, and just, speaking of sharks, we're not on the sharks menu. Okay,
No.
Sharks only bite us if they're confused.
Yes.
And it's rare that a shark will eat a person, because everyone thinks that if you bleed into the water, you'll attract a shark. That's actually false, because we're land mammals. They eat marine mammals.
Right.
They have a very specific diet. So they usually only attack you if it's murky water and they get confused.
Yeah.
So clean water, doesn't make you bulletproof, but it allows a shark to see what you are. And, I mean, I've been diving for over 20 years. I've been in the water with a lot of sharks, and, they're not killers. Then they play by a set of rules.
Right.
And,
well, if you can step on a nurse shark, it's going to bite you. And most are, like you said, confused. And I think black wetsuits tend to look a little bit like seals, because particularly great whites, they hunt from the bottom up, right? And, they don't come at you head on. And looking up against a sunlit surface of the water, all they see is this black, shiny object. And I think in their mind, they go, that's a good seal. That's huge. Let's eat that. And then they take one bite, which is usually a life-ending bite if it's a big shark, and they don't finish you. They just go, oh, sorry about that, and they move on, right? But at that point, damage is done. That's my view on sharks, anyway. Was there a moment when you questioned whether this business was viable, and if so, what kept you going?
Look, I mean, I think there's a very big part of me that questions everything I do. And you have to be careful. I have to be careful on how much validity or emphasis I put on external validation, because it doesn't always come. But if I get to the point where, why did I do this? What needs did I see being grossly unmet that I wanted to fulfill on? And then I feel it drawing me forward like a vacuum. Some people can, go, this is what I want. I'm hitting that target and that's what I'm going for. Me, I tend to go, well, there's a huge need there and it does align with who I am. And I would be super satisfied if I did that. That's my perpetual motivation. And when I go forward like that, I'm a lot more open to the options that are presenting around me, and having the solutions appear in maybe a different form than if I'm like, that's what I want exactly there. And that, for me, tends to stop me being open to all the different ways of going about it. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it's right on. For listeners unfamiliar with it, how do you define breathwork in simple, practical terms? I mean, I can see someone going, I know how to breathe. Why do I need lessons on how to breathe? Yeah. Look, there it is, demonstrated. Obviously, it's way more than that. So, in a short explanation,
yeah, sure.
What's breathwork all about?
So our work as entrepreneurs can be heavy. This makes it a whole lot lighter rather quickly. And it isn't meditation. Meditation is thoughts controlling thoughts. And I've had a train wreck going on up here, right? There's no way I could control that. But breath work is literally, it's a chemical override. So it's literally like going to the side of your house, pulling out the fuse switch, and you switch very rapidly from your fight or flight and what the hell, and there's threats coming in everywhere, to, you know what, I'm okay. I can be inside my own skin. I can feel my own body and look at this beautiful thing around me. Like, it's the quickest way I know to switch into a rested and connected state. And believe me, I've tried all the external substances, not all, but a lot, to know that breath work, the more you do it, the more you realize it's not a set of lungs we have, It's a medicine cabinet with a lot of different shelves. When you breathe a certain way, you'll elicit a certain response. So if you want to get up and kick ass and chew bubblegum, then you breathe a certain way. When you want to relax at the end of the day, you breathe a certain way. If I'm working with high school students and they want to drop their cortisol but keep their mental acuity, you breathe a certain way. So we've lost the knowledge of all the awesome things our own body can do for us. And breathwork is one of those toolkits that, if it's in your back pocket, gives you a whole lot more power over any situation. Does it make you bulletproof? No, but it certainly ups the likelihood of you getting the outcome you want. So just to highlight the negative, if you saw somebody, if you ask someone to do a job and they're going, do you think they'd be effective in fulfilling on that? But if you ask someone to do a job and they go, there's a
just
whether
watching
we know it
you
or not,
do that gave me confidence. Yeah. Just watching you take a deep breath and answer calmly. I feel a little bit like you did in the water with your friend, right? That instant sense of confidence. That it was. I could hear the thoughtfulness just in the breath. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs who are successful on paper but exhausted in reality?
Firstly, I hear you. And it's the best intentions that we go forward, and it can be quite ironic that we end up with these situations where everyone else is enjoying our work and we're not, So to that, you have to look at it somewhat mechanically. We naturally, in our natural state, we can connect to others, we can connect to our body. And whenever we're not connected, there's a blockage. So if someone looks good on paper and their own personal life isn't where they want it to be, there's a blockage there somewhere. And the good news is, if you can find that blockage and you can address that, then all of a sudden things return back to normal very rapidly. And this is classically what a healer does. They don't so much heal you as they know how to extrude the blockages so you can then connect to all the awesome things you've got in your life. Because on paper, everything's awesome, but there's something blocking us from getting in there. Mm-hmm. Now, without sounding like a self-licking ice cream, it's usually a form of fatigue that has that blockage happening. But unfortunately, people in those situations, they're used to sort of seeing good results, and they associate, well, I've really pushed myself here, but I'm getting good results, so I'll keep on doing that. And so they're in this pattern recognition that they're almost getting a sense of self-worth and sense of accomplishment, knowing that I've really pushed myself here. There must be some good happening somewhere. It's not to me, but that's the loop that they can be in. So it's not just the removal of the blockage, it's allowing a new state of receivership to happen in your life. Because think of it, if someone goes to the gym and they push hard and they get gains, and then they associate, well, that's what you do. You keep pushing hard, you keep pushing gains. It's a matter of time before you bust yourself up and you wonder why you're so broken. And it started with the best intentions and started with the best results. So again, talking about that performance pyramid, usually this shows up in the unseen part of a person's life. How much rest, recovery, healing, rejuvenation art forms. So the art form of regeneration, you cut an arm off, you can grow it back. And what I encourage people to see is this formula that I call energetic millionaire. So think of your energy like money. How you invest it is how you get it back. There's certain things that you do that you invest energy into that you get energy back from. There's certain people that you hang out with that you get energy back from. There's certain things that you do that take energy from you. There's certain people that take energy from you. And life occurs very differently if you're walking down the street and you've got 2 cents worth of energy than if you've got $1 million worth of energy. And this is where, your performance pyramid is relative to you and unique to you, and your recovery pyramid is very unique to you. And the most universal, and the reason I do what I do is because everyone breathes, and it's quite a universal thing. Having breath work as part of the bottom of the pyramid, to give you that perspective, to give you that energetic millionaire feeling.
Interesting. We're about out of time, but I do have one more question for you. How did you define success when you first started your company, and how do you define it today?
When I first started, it was all about pain avoidance. I was in pain. I wanted to get through pain. I want to help other people get through their pain. But what I've learned is restoring your energy levels, getting the healing you need, gets you to the start line of flourishing, bringing your gifts into the world. So success is seeds, not just growing, but flourishing, because everyone's got seeds of uniqueness inside of them, seeds of greatness, and people want them to flourish, and they create businesses, they create, careers, whatever that is. And so I've redefined my definition of success in the business world, because I can't do what you do, Mike. I can't do what your listeners do. But if I can improve their sleep, then they're going to be bringing their gifts into the world even better. And so it's not the sleep that gets me excited. It's seeing all those seeds of greatness flourishing once these seeds have reached the right energetic levels, because they're laying dormant until they get the right energy, right? And then once, all those energy levels start increasing by quality sleep, it's not the quality sleep that gets me excited. It's the unique flourishing that individual has and the gifts that they're bringing into the world. So that is my definition of success.
Excellent. For my listeners and viewers that would like to get more information on Breathwork in Bed, if you are watching this on YouTube, look down here somewhere where it says see more, and there'll be a link to the website for Breathwork in Bed. If you're listening to this on your favorite podcast app and you want information on how to contact Tim through his company, look at the show notes on your podcast app, and that information will be there. I'd encourage you all to do that so that you can start, once again, kicking ass and chewing bubblegum, as Tim says. So, Tim, thank you so much for being my guest. You're an inspiration to me, and I'm sure my audience. And I'll if I'm ever in the water and a shark comes up to me, I hope you're next to me. I will have instant confidence if you are. And I hope I'm never in that position, but if I am, you got to be there. Fair enough?
Give me a call, I'll be there.
I appreciate that. I'll tell the shark, hold on. Someone's got to take a 15-hour flight to Los Angeles, but you'll be here eventually. I appreciate it, Tim, and best of continued success with your business and helping to heal the world. I appreciate what you do.
Thanks, Mike. I can't believe it's been 40, 50 minutes. It went really quickly. So thanks for being a great host.
Well, there's two types of time. There's real time and there's podcast time. And podcast time is like dog years. It just goes 7 times faster than it's perceived to. It's just the way it is. Thanks again, Tim. It's good to talk to you. And that's a wrap. Here are a few final thoughts. One of the things that stands out to me about Tim's story is that it challenges a narrative many of us carry, especially as entrepreneurs, that more discipline, more effort, and more endurance will always produce better results. Tim's experience reminds us that even the most capable, highly trained people have limits, and ignoring those limits doesn't make us stronger, it delays the consequences. What's also important here is that Tim didn't walk away from performance when things broke down. He redefined it. Instead of chasing output at any cost, he built a life and a business around sustainability, recovery, and long-term resilience. That shift didn't come from theory or trends. It came from lived experience, hard lessons, and the humility to admit that what worked before no longer did. For entrepreneurs in my audience, this episode is a reminder that success isn't only about what you build. It's about whether you're still healthy enough to lead it. Sleep, recovery, and stress management aren't indulgencies or afterthoughts. They're foundational. And sometimes the most entrepreneurial decision you can make is to stop pushing just long enough to recover, rethink, and reinvent what success really looks like. Thanks for joining me on this episode of The Reluctant Entrepreneur. A very special thanks to Tim Thomas for being my guest on this episode. We have been very busy recording future episodes with fascinating guests, so be sure to subscribe to get notified when new episodes drop. And one personal favor, if you're watching this on YouTube, consider giving us a like and subscribe. Those 2 simple clicks actually really help us expand our reach. If you're an entrepreneur or know someone who would make a great guest, I'd love to hear from you. Visit reluctantentrepreneur.podcast.com to apply or recommend a guest. You can also reach me directly at mike@reluctantentrepreneur.podcast.com. And a shameless plug, if you're interested in my book, The Reluctant Entrepreneur, Anatomy of a Business Startup from Uncertainty to Unstoppable. It's available in paperback and Kindle on Amazon and as an audiobook on both Audible and Amazon. Well, that's it for today. Thanks again for listening or watching. Until next time, be unstoppable, and I'll see you again soon.